There was once a man who tried to run from God. His name was Jonah. And what happened next would become one of the strangest and most unforgettable stories in the entire Bible. One night, God gave Jonah a mission. A city called Nineveh had become full of violence and corruption. The people had turned away from what was right. God wanted Jonah to go there and deliver a warning. But Jonah didn't want to go. Nineveh was dangerous. It was the capital of the powerful Assyrian Empire, a place known for cruelty and war. If Jonah walked into that city and started preaching judgment, he might never come out alive. So Jonah made a decision. Instead of obeying God, he ran. But Jonah didn't just run away a little. He tried to escape as far as possible. He went down to the port city of Joppa and boarded a ship sailing across the sea, heading toward Tarshish, a place in the complete opposite direction of Nineveh. To Jonah, it probably felt like freedom. The ship sailed, the wind was calm, and the prophet of God went below deck and fell asleep. But far above the quiet sea, a storm was forming, a storm unlike anything the sailors had ever seen. The wind began to roar. The waves grew taller. The ship groaned under the pressure of the sea, and the sailors would soon discover something terrifying. This storm was not an accident. It was following one man, and before the night was over, that man would be thrown into the ocean and swallowed by something waiting in the deep. Water wave. The sea was calm when the ship first left the harbor. The sailors moved confidently across the deck as the vessel sailed away from the port city of Joppa. The wind was gentle, the sky clear, and the journey ahead looked peaceful. Below the deck, one passenger had already fallen asleep. His name was Jonah. He had paid the fare and boarded the ship quickly, eager to leave everything behind. Far away across the sea lay Tarshish, a distant land in the complete opposite direction of Nineveh. To Jonah, it probably felt like an escape. If he could just reach Tarshish, he believed he could leave God's mission behind. But something began to change in the sky. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon. At first, the sailors barely noticed. Storms sometimes appeared suddenly on the open sea. They had seen bad weather before, but this storm was different. The wind rose suddenly, slamming against the sails with terrifying force. The waves began to grow taller, crashing violently against the sides of the ship. Within minutes, the calm sea had become chaos. Thunder roared across the sky. Lightning flashed over the water. The ship groaned as the powerful waves lifted it high into the air and dropped it back down again. The sailors shouted to one another as they struggled to control the vessel. Secure the cargo. Tighten the ropes. Hold the sail. But the storm only grew worse. Soon the sailors realized something terrifying. The ship might not survive. Water crashed across the deck as the waves continued to grow stronger. The vessel rocked violently from side to side. Fear spread across the faces of the crew. These were experienced sailors, men who had spent their lives on the sea. Yet none of them had ever seen a storm like this. Each man began calling out to his own God, praying desperately for help. But the wind continued to scream. The waves grew even higher. Finally, the captain made a desperate decision. Throw the cargo overboard. One by one, the sailors began lifting heavy crates and tossing them into the sea. Valuable goods disappeared beneath the waves as the crew tried to lighten the ship. But nothing worked. The storm did not weaken. It grew stronger. Then the captain remembered something. One of the passengers had disappeared below deck. While the sailors fought for their lives above, someone had gone to sleep. The captain rushed down into the lower part of the ship and found Jonah lying there, sleeping. The captain shook him awake. "How can you sleep?" he shouted. "Get up. Call on your God. Maybe your God will help us so we won't perish." Jonah slowly rose to his feet as the ship continued to shake violently around them. Soon he was standing on the deck with the terrified sailors. By now the crew had begun to suspect something strange. Storms like this didn't just happen. Something, or someone, had caused it. One of the sailors spoke up. "Let's cast lots to find out who is responsible for this disaster." They believed fate would reveal the truth. Small marked stones were thrown, and the result would show who had brought this terrible storm upon them. The sailors watched carefully as the lots were cast. Moments later, the answer appeared. The lot fell on Jonah. All eyes turned toward him. The wind howled across the deck as the sailors surrounded the mysterious passenger. "Tell us," they demanded. "Who is responsible for this storm? What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What people are you from?" Jonah looked around at the frightened faces staring back at him. Then he spoke the truth. "I am a Hebrew," he said quietly, "and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, the one who made the sea and the dry land." The moment the sailors heard those words, their fear deepened. If Jonah's God truly controlled the sea, then the storm raging around them might be something far greater than they had imagined. And the question that followed would change everything. "What have you done?" they asked. Because deep down, they were beginning to realize that this storm was chasing one man. Waterwave. The storm raged louder than ever. The ship was being torn apart by the violent waves, and the terrified sailors stood around Jonah, waiting for answers. The wind howled across the deck. The sea crashed against the sides of the ship like a hammer. Every man on board could feel it. Something supernatural was happening. They stared at Jonah. "What have you done?" they demanded. Jonah lowered his eyes. He knew exactly why this storm had come. He knew the truth they were afraid to hear. Taking a deep breath, Jonah finally spoke. "I am running away from the Lord." The sailors froze. Running away from God. Jonah continued, "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, the one who made the sea and the dry land." The moment the sailors heard those words, their fear turned into terror. If Jonah's God truly created the sea, then this storm was no ordinary storm. It was a storm sent by the Creator himself. And suddenly the sailors realized something frightening. They were caught in the middle of a conflict between a man and God. The waves crashed even harder against the ship. Water poured across the deck. The sailors shouted over the roaring wind, "What should we do to you, so the sea will calm down for us?" Jonah looked out over the dark, violent water. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he gave them an answer they never expected. "Pick me up," Jonah said, "and throw me into the sea." The sailors were stunned. Throw him into the sea? That would mean certain death. The ocean was wild and merciless. No man could survive those waves. But Jonah continued, "I know that it is my fault this great storm has come upon you." The sailors looked at one another. None of them wanted to do it. Even though they were pagan sailors from different nations, they did not want to take a man's life. So instead of throwing Jonah overboard, they tried one last desperate plan. They grabbed the oars and began rowing as hard as they could. Their muscles burned as they fought against the storm. They pushed with everything they had, trying to steer the ship back toward land. But the sea only grew more violent. The wind screamed louder. The waves rose higher. It was impossible. Finally, the exhausted sailors stopped rowing. They realized there was no escape. Slowly, they turned back toward Jonah. Before doing anything, the sailors did something unexpected. They prayed. But this time, they did not pray to their own gods. They cried out to the God Jonah had spoken about. "O Lord," they said, "please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man." Then they said something remarkable. "For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." They believed the storm was under God's control, and they knew they had no choice. The sailors carefully lifted Jonah. The wind roared. The sea crashed. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then they threw him overboard. Jonah disappeared into the raging sea. And something incredible happened next. The moment Jonah hit the water, the storm stopped. Instantly, the wind died. The waves calmed. The sea became still. The sailors stared in shock at the quiet ocean around them. Moments ago, they had been fighting for their lives. Now the water was completely calm. The men fell to their knees in fear and awe. They realized they had just witnessed the power of the true God. And on that quiet sea, the sailors began to worship the Lord. But beneath the calm surface of the water, Jonah was sinking deeper and deeper into the darkness of the ocean, down into the cold depths, down where no man could survive. Yet unknown to Jonah, God was not finished with him, because somewhere in the dark waters of the sea, something enormous was moving. Whale. The ocean swallowed Jonah instantly. Cold water rushed over him as he sank beneath the surface. The light from the sky above faded quickly as the sea closed around him. Down he went. The waves that had once thrown the ship around were now silent above him. All Jonah could hear was the muffled roar of water and the pounding of his own heart. He tried to swim, but the currents were too strong. The sea was too deep, and Jonah knew something terrifying. No one could survive this. The prophet who tried to run from God was now alone in the depths of the ocean. The water grew darker, colder. The last bit of sunlight disappeared. Jonah sank deeper into the darkness. But at that very moment, something massive moved through the water. Something alive. Something enormous. From the depths of the sea, a giant creature approached. Then suddenly, Jonah disappeared. He was swallowed whole by a great fish sent by God. According to the story recorded in the book of Jonah, the Lord had prepared this creature for one purpose: to save Jonah's life. Jonah expected death. Instead, he found himself alive, inside the belly of the great fish. Everything around him was dark. The air was heavy and foul. The walls of the creature's stomach moved slowly around him as the giant fish swam through the deep ocean. Jonah could hear the distant movement of water outside. He could feel the creature turning through the sea. There was no escape, no light, no direction. For the first time since he ran away from God, Jonah was completely alone with his thoughts. And in that darkness, he began to understand something. You can run from people. You can run from cities. But you cannot run from God. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah remained inside the great fish. 3 days in total darkness. 3 days with nothing but the sound of the ocean and the beating of his heart. And during those long hours, Jonah began to pray. Not a casual prayer, not a quick prayer spoken in fear, but a desperate cry from the depths of his soul. From inside the belly of the fish, Jonah cried out to the Lord. In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. He remembered the moment he had been thrown into the sea. He remembered the waves closing over him. He remembered believing that his life was over. The waters closed in over me to take my life, Jonah prayed. The deep surrounded me, seaweed wrapped around my head. Jonah believed he had reached the very bottom of the earth. But then he realized something incredible. Even there, God had not abandoned him. When my life was fainting away, Jonah prayed. I remembered the Lord. Inside the darkness of the great fish, Jonah finally surrendered. He stopped running. He stopped resisting. And he promised God something. What I have vowed I will pay, Jonah said. Salvation belongs to the Lord. The prayer echoed in the darkness. And at that exact moment, something changed. The great fish suddenly began swimming upward, up through the deep ocean, up toward the surface of the sea. And soon, the creature would deliver Jonah back to the world of the living in a way no one would ever forget. Well, for 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah remained inside the belly of the great fish. No light, no sense of time, only darkness and the constant movement of the ocean around him. Inside that living prison, Jonah had done the one thing he refused to do before. He prayed, not a rushed prayer spoken in panic, but a prayer of surrender. Jonah finally admitted the truth. He could not run from God. And the moment he turned his heart back to the Lord, something remarkable happened. The giant fish that had swallowed him began to rise through the ocean. Higher, closer to the surface, closer to land. Then suddenly, the creature reached the shore. With a violent motion, the great fish opened its mouth, and Jonah was thrown back on a dry land. The prophet lay on the sand, soaked with seawater and exhausted, gasping for air. He had gone from the depths of the ocean back to the world of the living. It was a miracle. God had saved the very man who tried to run away from him. But the story was not over, because the mission Jonah tried to escape was still waiting. Soon after Jonah recovered, the word of the Lord came to him again. The same command, the same city. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim the message I give you. This time, Jonah did not run. He had already seen what happened when he tried to escape. Now he stood up, wiped the sand from his clothes, and began the long journey toward Nineveh. The city was enormous. Ancient historians described it as one of the largest cities of the ancient world, a powerful capital of the Assyrian Empire. Its walls stretched for miles. Its streets were crowded with thousands of people, merchants, soldiers, families, leaders. And according to the story recorded in the book of Jonah, it took 3 days just to walk across the city. When Jonah finally arrived, the moment of truth had come. This was the place he feared, the place he tried to avoid. Yet now he stood at the entrance of the massive city. Taking a deep breath, Jonah stepped forward. He walked into the crowded streets of Nineveh and began to proclaim a message from God. 40 more days, Jonah cried out, and Nineveh will be overthrown. The message echoed through the markets, the streets, and the city gates. At first, people stopped and stared. Who was this strange foreign prophet? Why was he warning their city of destruction? But as Jonah continued speaking, something unexpected began to happen. The people of Nineveh started to listen, and soon, the entire city would react in a way no one expected. When Jonah entered the massive city of Nineveh, he carried only one message. A warning. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. He repeated the words as he walked through the crowded streets. Markets went quiet. Merchants stopped speaking. People turned to look at the stranger proclaiming judgment over their city. Nineveh was known across the ancient world as a powerful and feared place. It was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, an empire famous for conquest, war, and cruelty. Yet something unexpected happened. The people did not laugh at Jonah. They did not chase him away. Instead, they listened. Word of Jonah's warning spread quickly through the streets, the marketplaces, and the homes of the city. Soon the message reached the palace of the king himself. When the king of Nineveh heard Jonah's words, he did something shocking. He stood up from his throne. He removed his royal robe. Then he put on sackcloth, the rough clothing worn by people in mourning or repentance. The powerful ruler of the city sat down in ashes, showing humility before God. Then he issued a decree across the entire city. No one was to continue life as usual. Everyone was to fast. No food, no drink. Every person, from the greatest noble to the poorest citizen, was to wear sackcloth and cry out to God for mercy. Even the animals were included in the command. The king declared, "Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence." Then he added something remarkable. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Across the enormous city of Nineveh, people began to change their behavior. Violence stopped. People prayed. Families humbled themselves. The entire city waited anxiously. Would God destroy Nineveh? Or would he show mercy? Then the moment came. According to the book of Jonah, God saw what the people of Nineveh had done. He saw that they had turned away from their evil. And because of their repentance, God chose mercy instead of destruction. The city was spared. Nineveh would not be destroyed. But strangely, when Jonah heard this news, he was not happy. In fact, Jonah became deeply angry. The prophet who had just witnessed one of the greatest moments of repentance in history was furious. And what Jonah said next would reveal the real reason he tried to run from God in the first place. When Jonah saw that God had spared the city of Nineveh, he became deeply upset. Instead of celebrating, Jonah was angry. Very angry. He went outside the city and began to complain to God. "Isn't this what I said would happen?" Jonah cried. "That is why I tried to run away before. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and full of mercy." Jonah sat down east of the city and built a small shelter. From there, he watched Nineveh, still hoping that somehow the city might be destroyed. But God had something else to teach him. The next day, God caused a plant to grow quickly beside Jonah. The large leaves spread over him, giving shade from the burning sun. For the first time in a while, Jonah felt comfortable. He was very happy about the plant. But the following morning, God sent a small worm to attack the plant. Within hours, the plant withered and died. Soon the hot desert wind began to blow. The sun beat down on Jonah's head so intensely that he felt faint. Once again, Jonah became frustrated and cried out, "It would be better for me to die than to live." Then God spoke to Jonah. "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" Jonah answered stubbornly, "Yes, it is." Then God revealed the powerful lesson behind everything that had happened. "You care about the plant," God said, "though you did not make it grow. It appeared in a night and disappeared in a night. Yet Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many animals as well. Should I not care about that great city?" At that moment, Jonah understood something important. God's mercy was greater than Jonah's anger. God cared not only about one prophet, but about entire nations, even people who had once been enemies. The story recorded in the book of Jonah ends with this powerful question, a reminder that God's compassion is wider than human judgment. Jonah tried to run from God, but in the end, God used Jonah to save an entire city. And the message of the story still echoes today. You can run from God, but you cannot outrun his purpose. Waterwave Whale.